Welcome to the first episode of Global Intelligence Today. Today's episode is basically going to be a breakdown on some geopolitics, kind of some stuff that's been going on with China. Recently they've been trying to take Taiwan over, which taking over other countries, It's kind of scary stuff. So you have Taiwan. There's always been China. We talk about China a lot. And it's often unclear who is in control of Taiwan or whether Taiwan is in control of China. And it's obviously intentional. Taiwan would like to be in control of mainland China. China would like to be in control of Taiwan. So it is in both sides' interest to keep pushing this agenda that, the war is still continuing, that it's still a question as to which country is legitimate. Both countries are benefiting from this argument. And the global spotlight is currently sitting on top of China and Taiwan, watching. We just saw that Germany and Japan formed an alliance for the first time since World War II. You see that Japan is mobilizing their defensive military in a manner that is clearly offensive. You see Taiwan training their military. Not much they can do because you've got big China just sitting there with all their boats just parked right off the shore, running drills every day. So seeing this, some of us have to ask, why is this happening? Why is the dispute between China and Taiwan even in existence? So to break it down, we actually have to go back a few hundred years. So let's get into it. In the beginning, there was the island of Formosa. Formosa, discovered by the Portuguese as they were trying to unlock new trade routes, was later settled by the Spanish and then the Dutch. Now the Dutch really took off. They were building military bases and trading posts and ports, and they had a whole microeconomy going on in Taiwan. Taiwan, first controlled by mainland China, 1644. Now that's weird, just from the get-go, because the People's Republic of China, mainland China, their main argument for taking Taiwan back is that they had Taiwan first. They were the first there, the first to control it, and really, that's just not true. Prior to Chinese occupancy, there was the Dutch East India Company was actually there and in control of Taiwan for a long time. And then eventually in 1644, mainland China finally took Taiwan from the Dutch. When they take Taiwan, I'm referring to the fact that China took Taiwan in as a territory, similar to how the United States would consider Puerto Rico a territory rather than a state or a certified, piece of that country. Later, in 1683, Taiwan was integrated as a part of the Qing dynasty in mainland China. So they were finally reunified as one China, and that was it. Until China went to war with Japan. Now, there was a civil war in China going on prior to the war with Japan, but it was between the communists and the Republicans. And the Republicans really just wanted to win the war and for it to be over with, but Japan is invading. So eventually what happens is the two sides of the Civil War team up, and after the alliance, they defeat Japan and just resume fighting. So as soon as the war with Japan ends, they just keep fighting. And at this point, the Republicans are not doing well. Their troops have been diminished. The CCP is just growing stronger by day, and really it was kind of just like a push down south. They're getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and eventually they just fled, ended up in Taiwan. All of the government officials were still there. The government of China was still operating, just now it was physically located in Taiwan. The Chinese Communist Party is now in China. The Republicans have now left China They were in charge of China, but they left, and now they're in Taiwan. So now you have two opposing governments in two different areas. Now, at this point in time, most nations or even people would consider those two as countries now. I mean, the fighting stopped. There's two governments that are, hey, they might not be good governments, they might be corrupt, but they are still governments, and they're still in two different geographical locations, which means that those are two sovereign nations. This is where things kind of get a little weird, because you have Taiwan. Taiwan used to be in control of China. They used to own China, basically. Now, they're corrupt. They're doing bad deals. I mean, they're exploiting the locals, the people that were already living in Taiwan before they got there. They're just exploiting them. And eventually, these indigenous people, they just start to starve to death. And they become weaker. They can't work. Thanks to Japan's occupancy and them being there in World War II, they actually improved Taiwan's standard of living significantly, and mainland China didn't even catch up to Taiwan's standard of living until the 80s. The decline in standard of living was actually significant. The corruption that the Republicans had in Taiwan to decrease this standard of living was actually really significant, because they were bringing their own country and potentially putting them at risk of being taken over by an up-and-coming communist China. As the years went on, the people were beginning to be frustrated with this government. They said that they'd had enough. I mean, there was parties, they were trying to have democratic elections, and it wasn't until 2000 that the opposing party to the Republicans was finally elected in Taiwan, and a lot of people would consider somewhere between 1987 and 2000 to be when Taiwan became democratic Taiwan. They were no longer controlled by one corrupt party. And see, at this point in time, Taiwan's urge to take back China is slowly diminishing as they're starting to differentiate themselves from China. The Taiwanese people are no longer viewing themselves as Chinese, but rather Taiwanese, which would be a mix of the Han Chinese and a mix of the indigenous people that were there before they came. So these people are combining, they're having children, and these children are now identifying as Taiwanese rather than Chinese. China, mainland China, the communist China, they think that there's one China. Now you would think that, oh, well, Taiwan must think something else. Taiwan must believe that there's two Chinas, because they don't want to be identified. They're Taiwanese. And yet, in 1992, there was a consensus where Taiwan and China both agreed that there is only one China. Although Taiwan may no longer be capable of taking over China, mainland China, communist China, they still intend to do so. They still intend to be in control of communist China, the mainland. On the other hand, mainland China still intends to be in control of Taiwan. They believe that since the 1600s, Taiwan is rightfully part of mainland China, and whoever's in control of the mainland is thus in control of Taiwan. The United States depends on Taiwan and TSMC for our chips. So not only is it in China's interest militarily and territorially, but also economically and financially, because taking Taiwan can actually really hurt the United States, as we depend on them for our computer chips. I believe that this takeover doesn't really have anything to do with reunification of China, and it would probably be easier for the two countries to go their separate ways. Now, I'm saying this because when one country takes over another country in a hostile way, the people in the country that's being taken over are going to resist. These Taiwanese people have identified as such since at least the 70s, when Richard Nixon announced to the world that Taiwan and China were two separate countries. Taiwan. There's a lot going on in the news. Is Taiwan a country? Is Taiwan a part of communist China? Is communist China a part of Taiwan? Like, maybe mainland China is West Taiwan. I don't know.